August 17th, 1944. The roads of northern France shimmered under a relentless sun. Dust rose in great clouds as a seemingly endless line of trucks rumbled along battered highways. Engines growled, tires crunched gravel, and a scent of fuel mingled with the dry, hot air. Men squinted through the heat, gripping steering wheels with white-knuckled tension, aware that each mile could mean survival or death. The Red Ball Express, a lifeline of steel and gasoline, snaked its way across the countryside. Convoys moved in tight formation, navigating craters, broken bridges, and enemy fire. Drivers communicated with hand signals, radios, and nerves honed by exhaustion. Behind each truck, a chain of supplies stretched back to ports and depots, carrying the fuel, ammunition, and provisions that would keep Patton's armored columns racing forward. Far to the east, German generals laughed. Americans cannot supply such an advance. They scoffed, convinced that logistics would choke the Allies long before tanks reached their lines. Yet here, on the sun-baked roads, the reality was impossible to deny. The Red Ball Express was moving, unstoppable, and fueling a blitz that would leave the enemy scrambling. The roar of engines signaled more than movement. It heralded a turning point in modern warfare. Summer 1944 had reshaped the landscape of Western Europe. After the brutal slog of the Normandy landings, Allied forces had broken through the German defensive lines. The Bocage country, once a maze of hedgerows that favored defenders, had been penetrated. The liberation of towns and villages moved swiftly, yet for every mile gained, a new challenge emerged: supply. The vast distances between the beaches of Normandy and the advancing front lines strained the Allies' logistics beyond anything anticipated. General George S. Patton's Third Army embodied this challenge. Rapid, aggressive, and audacious, Patton demanded speed. Tanks thundered forward, infantry advanced in their wake, and artillery units followed, laying down barges that kept the Germans off balance. But each unit required a constant stream of fuel, ammunition, and rations. Fuel was particularly critical. Without it, the Blitz could stall, turning momentum into disaster. The American High Command faced a logistical nightmare. Ports were limited, railways damaged, and roads congested or cratered by retreating German forces. Standard supply methods could not keep pace with Patton's ambitions. It was in this context that the concept of the Red Ball Express was conceived, a dedicated, high-priority convoy system designed to shuttle fuel and supplies from the beaches and captured ports to the front lines at unprecedented speed. Thousands of trucks, manned largely by African-American drivers, became the backbone of this effort. Convoys moved in tight columns, following carefully planned routes, maintaining schedules that left little room for error. Bridges and roads had to be repaired on the fly. Fuel had to be rationed and prioritized to ensure that tanks never ran dry. Each truck carried more than cargo. It carried the promise of continued momentum, the very lifeblood of Patton's advance. German intelligence, by contrast, viewed the logistical demands of the American army with a mix of skepticism and derision. Generals assumed that the Allies could not maintain rapid advances over broken terrain, under fire, and with limited infrastructure. Americans are good fighters, but they cannot feed themselves this far from their ports, one officer reportedly remarked. These assumptions would soon be shattered. The Red Ball Express was not merely a chain of supply. It was a marvel of organization and improvisation. Convoys ran day and night. Trucks replaced in minutes when breakdowns occurred, and mechanics worked tirelessly to keep the fleet operational. Drivers endured long hours, often in sweltering heat, facing fatigue, mechanical failures, and occasional enemy attacks. Yet the convoy system never faltered. The constant movement of supplies transformed logistical theory into action, demonstrating that mobility in modern warfare depended as much on efficient supply as on firepower. At the front, Patton's forces benefited immediately. Tanks pushed deeper into French territory. Artillery could be repositioned swiftly, and infantry units remained well-fed and equipped. The speed and reliability of the Red Ball Express amplified operational tempo, enabling breakthroughs that surprised even the most seasoned German commanders. For the Americans, logistics had become a weapon as vital as any tank, artillery piece, or fighter plane. This first phase of context establishes the tension: an advancing army hungry for fuel and supplies, and an enemy convinced that such rapid logistics was impossible. The stage was set for innovation, endurance, and the relentless march of convoys that would define the Red Ball Express. The next section will explore the deeper logistical challenges, human stories, and strategic innovations that allowed the system to function under pressure. The promise of the Red Ball Express was bold, but its execution was fraught with difficulty. Northern France in the summer of 1944 was a landscape scarred by war. Bombed bridges, cratered roads, and destroyed railways disrupted conventional supply lines. Convoys often traveled over detours, through narrow lanes, and across hastily repaired causeways. Each mile posed the risk of vehicle breakdown, enemy ambush, or navigational error. The stakes were high. A single stalled truck could delay fuel delivery to a tank column, leaving units vulnerable at the front. The trucks themselves were versatile but not invulnerable. Standard 2.5-ton GMC Deuce-and-a-half trucks formed the backbone of the fleet. They carried gasoline, ammunition, and rations, moving in strict convoy formations. When one truck failed, drivers had to improvise, sometimes transferring cargo on the roadside under intense heat or pouring fuel into jerry cans to continue the journey. Mechanics were in constant motion, repairing engines, replacing tires, and keeping the flow of supplies unbroken. The human element proved critical. African-American drivers, often overlooked by contemporaneous military hierarchies, demonstrated extraordinary resilience. Many had never driven long distances under such pressure, yet they mastered the routes, maintained schedules, and endured exhausting shifts. Exhaustion, dust, and relentless heat became constants, but so did determination. Drivers developed informal systems, hand signals, road markers, and convoy rules designed to maximize speed and minimize collisions or breakdowns. Their ingenuity was instrumental to the operation's success. Meanwhile, American planners coordinated supply priorities with meticulous precision. Routes were divided into one-way systems to prevent bottlenecks, and fuel allocation was constantly adjusted based on the needs of armored and infantry units. Night convoys became routine, illuminated only by headlights and flares, moving under strict radio silence to reduce the risk of enemy detection. The scale of coordination was unprecedented. Hundreds of trucks, thousands of personnel, and a network of depots and fueling points functioning as a single, fluid organism. German commanders, observing from the rear, remained skeptical. They assumed that American supply lines would buckle under strain. The rapid pace of Patton's advance defied expectation. Towns fell before adequate supply could be established, yet the Red Ball Express kept the momentum alive. Each convoy that reached the front reinforced the operational tempo, demonstrating that logistical superiority could directly translate into battlefield advantage. Beyond the technical and operational challenges, the Red Ball Express revealed a deeper truth about modern warfare. Victory required not just strategy and firepower, but the seamless integration of human effort, transportation, and industrial capacity. It was a testament to planning, adaptability, and endurance. The system exemplified how logistics could amplify combat effectiveness, sustain advances, and compensate for uncertainties in terrain or enemy resistance. By late August, the first phase of the Red Ball Express had proven itself indispensable. Fuel, ammunition, and rations flowed at rates that astonished both Allied commanders and their German adversaries. The system enabled Patton's armored divisions to execute rapid maneuvers, outflanking German positions and maintaining pressure that forced enemy withdrawals. The success of this network was not a coincidence. It was the result of careful planning, human resilience, and relentless execution under the most challenging conditions. The foundation of context is now established. an advancing army, stretched supply lines, innovative logistics, and a skeptical enemy. The stage is set to explore the angles of this operation: human endurance, technological ingenuity, leadership decisions, and tactical consequences that together reveal why the Red Ball Express became a decisive element in the Allied advance. The drivers of the Red Ball Express were the unsung heroes of Patton's advance. Long hours behind the wheel, relentless heat, and constant dust took their toll. Men shifted for 12 to 18 hours at a stretch, navigating narrow roads, cratered bridges, and rolling hills under the threat of mechanical failure or enemy observation. Exhaustion was constant, yet determination never faltered. African-American drivers, often overlooked by their peers and superiors, displayed extraordinary resilience and ingenuity. They adapted to convoy rules, improvised repairs, and learned to read subtle cues in the terrain that could mean the difference between timely delivery and disaster. Each mile driven was a testament to human endurance, discipline, and courage, a reminder that logistics relied as much on people as on machines. Tactical angle. The Red Ball Express reshaped battlefield tactics. Fuel and ammunition reached armored columns at unprecedented speed, allowing Patton's forces to maintain relentless pressure on retreating German units. Tanks could advance further without pause. Artillery could reposition with minimal delay, and infantry units remained supplied for rapid exploitation of breakthroughs. German defensive strategies, predicated on slower Allied advances, crumbled under this logistical acceleration. The Allies demonstrated that control of supply lines was as decisive as control of territory, transforming movement and maneuver into a weapon that German commanders could neither ignore nor counter effectively. Technological angle. The technological backbone of the operation was deceptively simple, yet remarkably effective. Standardized 2.5-ton trucks, reinforced fuel tanks, and durable spare parts formed the heart of the convoy system. Radio communication allowed coordination over hundreds of miles, while traffic management, one-way routes, staggered departures, and strict convoy discipline maximized throughput. Maintenance teams follow behind, ready to repair engines, replace tires, or offload cargo to keep convoys moving. Technology and planning combined to create a system capable of sustaining high-tempo operations over broken terrain, exemplifying how modern warfare depended on the integration of machines, infrastructure, and human skill. Leadership angle. Patton's leadership was inseparable from the success of the Red Ball Express. His insistence on speed, adaptability, and audacity required reliable logistics. Yet he understood that the human dimension was equally crucial. Commanders at all levels coordinated with planners, mechanics, and drivers to maintain momentum. Decisions on prioritizing fuel, scheduling convoys, and managing breakdowns were made rapidly, reflecting a leadership style that valued initiative, flexibility, and relentless pressure on the enemy. Patton's vision demonstrated that strategy was not only about battlefield maneuvers, but also about ensuring the arteries of supply remained open, enabling forces to strike hard and fast. These angles, the endurance of drivers, the tactical advantage conferred, the technological systems in place, and the decisive leadership guiding operations, paint a multifaceted picture of the Red Ball Express. They show how human effort, innovation, and foresight intertwined to create a logistical machine capable of sustaining one of the fastest advances in military history. The next section will expand on additional perspectives: the German view, the moral implications of sustaining such operations, and broader strategic considerations that further illustrate why the Red Ball Express shocked enemy commanders and transformed the European campaign. From a German viewpoint, the speed and efficiency of the Red Ball Express were bewildering. Commanders had long relied on the assumption that Allied forces would slow as supply lines stretched thin across devastated roads and bombed-out infrastructure. Yet Patton's armored columns seemed to defy these expectations. German intelligence reports noted the continuous flow of fuel and ammunition, the rapid redeployment of units, and the ability of American forces to maintain pressure without pause. For many, disbelief gave way to tactical frustration. plans for counterattacks were repeatedly foiled, defensive positions abandoned before full engagement. The Red Ball Express was not merely a logistical operation. To German generals, it had become a force multiplier that reshaped the battlefield. Moral angle. The operation also posed ethical and human considerations. Convoy drivers faced immense risk, yet their work was unarmed and essential to sustaining the army. The speed demanded by planners sometimes exceeded reasonable limits, pushing men to their physical and psychological boundaries. Yet within this grueling environment, camaraderie and initiative flourished. Soldiers and drivers improvised solutions, assisted one another, and developed an unspoken code to ensure the flow of supplies remained uninterrupted. This moral dimension, sacrificing comfort and safety for a greater operational purpose, underscored the human cost of logistics in modern warfare. Strategic angle. Strategically, the Red Ball Express demonstrated that victory was built on more than firepower. Rapid, reliable supply allowed Patton's forces to exploit opportunities created by operational success. The ability to project power over extended distances without pause forced German units into defensive postures, retreating under pressure they could not resist. Fuel, ammunition, and rations became as lethal as tanks or artillery. The Allies' capacity to sustain momentum highlighted a profound lesson. In modern warfare, logistics itself was a decisive weapon, capable of dictating tempo, shaping engagements, and undermining enemy morale. Operational innovation angle. Finally, the Red Ball Express exemplified adaptive military innovation. Planners integrated multiple components: trucks, drivers, mechanics, traffic control, scheduling, and route maintenance, into a coherent, efficient system. Disruptions were anticipated and mitigated through redundancy and flexibility. Convoys were rerouted when roads failed, drivers improvised repairs, and depots were strategically positioned to minimize transit times. This operational innovation demonstrated that the battlefield extended far beyond combat zones. It included roads, depots, workshops, and communication networks. Mastery over these elements allowed the Allies to maintain an unprecedented operational tempo, converting logistical foresight into battlefield advantage. The cumulative impact of these angles is clear. Human endurance, enemy misperception, moral and ethical considerations, strategic exploitation, and operational innovation combined to make the Red Ball Express an unprecedented phenomenon in military history. It was an orchestra of people, machines, and planning, moving in perfect harmony to sustain Patton's rapid advance across France. Late August 1944. The countryside of northern France shimmered with heat, dust rising in clouds from cracked roads. Patton's armored divisions thundered forward, fueled by an unrelenting stream of supplies delivered by the Red Ball Express. Tanks rolled in tight formations, artillery guns rattled across bridges, and infantry units followed, synchronized with a precision that confounded German observers. The roads themselves became arteries of war, carrying the lifeblood that sustained momentum, enabling advances that seemed impossible. Convoys moved day and night, engines growling, horns blaring, and headlights cutting through the haze of dust. Drivers navigated damaged roads, craters, and narrow lanes, constantly vigilant for mechanical failures or enemy action. A single truck's breakdown could halt a fuel line, threatening the advance of an entire armored column. Yet the system held. Mechanics followed closely behind, tools and spare parts at the ready, while radio operators coordinated schedules and rerouted convoys around obstacles. Each delivery, each mile traveled, was critical to sustaining the blitz. Patton's command depended on this reliability. Orders for rapid flanking maneuvers, deep thrusts into German-held territory, and surprise attacks hinged on fuel arriving on time. Armored divisions could strike at dawn, reposition by dusk, and pursue retreating forces relentlessly, all because the Red Ball Express kept moving. Supply was no longer a background operation. It was a weapon. German generals, once confident in their predictions, now faced disbelief. Reports came in from the front lines. American tanks had advanced further than anticipated, artillery units were repositioned faster than calculations allowed, and infantry units maintained their pace without pause. Attempts to mount counterattacks faltered, not because of tactical incompetence, but because the Allies could resupply faster than the Germans could disrupt. Logistics had become the decisive factor. The human drama was palpable. Drivers suffered exhaustion, navigating roads in heat that seemed unending, yet the cadence of convoys never slowed. Soldiers at the front witnessed fuel and ammunition arrive, just in time, sustaining their offensive thrusts. The interplay of human effort, mechanical reliability, and strategic foresight converged at this moment, creating a force multiplier that no German defense could withstand. A particularly vivid instance occurred near Nancy, France. Patton's tanks, advancing rapidly, faced a potential halt without immediate fuel. A convoy, rerouted from a secondary depot, arrived under tense timing, delivering fuel just as the column approached a critical bridgehead. The advance continued without pause, German defenders scrambling to respond. Moments like this repeated across northern France, each demonstrating that operational tempo was dictated not by terrain or enemy resistance, but by the ability to sustain supply. By the end of August, the Red Ball Express had reached operational perfection. Convoys transported thousands of tons of fuel, ammunition, and provisions daily. Roads were patrolled and repaired continuously. Breakdowns were mitigated swiftly. The Allied advance became a symphony of coordination. Trucks, tanks, artillery, and infantry all moving in rhythm, each dependent on the others, each fueled by the relentless drive of the Red Ball Express. The first phase of the climax illustrates the height of operational efficiency and human endurance. The system had proven itself. Supply could maintain speed, overcome obstacles, and outpace enemy expectations. Momentum, once threatened by logistical strain, became unstoppable. The stage is set for the next section to show the decisive consequences. The moment when German forces realized that no countermeasure could halt Patton's advance, and the full strategic impact of logistics became undeniable. Early September 1944. Patton's armored columns surged eastward, racing across the rolling hills and shattered villages of France. Dust rose in towering plumes behind every convoy of the Red Ball Express, signaling both movement and determination. Bridges patched in haste groaned under the weight of tanks, trucks, and artillery. For the first time, the speed of supply matched the speed of combat, creating a fluid front that German forces struggled to comprehend or counter. German generals, long confident in their predictions, now confronted an unsettling reality. Reports reached headquarters. Patton's columns advanced further each day than expected. Supply lines remained unbroken, and American forces pressed relentlessly without pause. Attempts to regroup or launch counterattacks failed. Fuel shortages, which had once been the presumed Achilles heel of the Allied advance, were non-existent. For the Germans, it was a revelation. The Americans were not merely fighting. They were sustained by a lifeline of unprecedented scale and efficiency. The human element intensified the drama. Drivers endured oppressive heat, fatigue, and broken roads. Yet they pressed forward, each mile a silent defiance of expectation. Night convoys moved with quiet urgency, headlights piercing the darkness, engines humming in precise cadence. Mechanics worked alongside, repairing engines, replacing tires, and improvising solutions that kept the lifeline unbroken. Soldiers at the front received fuel and ammunition in the nick of time, allowing armor divisions to exploit weaknesses, outflank enemy positions, and maintain operational tempo. One vivid moment unfolded near Metz. German defensive lines, anticipating a temporary pause in American momentum, prepared to mount a counteroffensive. Patton's tanks, however, advanced without delay, fueled by Red Ball Express convoys that arrived precisely when needed. German forces were outmaneuvered, artillery positions neutralized, and supply depots overrun. The realization was crushing. Logistical mastery had transformed speed into strategic advantage. The battlefield was no longer a measure solely of firepower or manpower. It was a reflection of the ability to sustain operations under pressure. Technological and organizational precision played a decisive role. Convoy scheduling, traffic management, and depot positioning ensured that even breakdowns or road damage did not halt the flow of resources. Each truck, each engine, each mile was calculated to maintain momentum. German attempts to disrupt supply, air attacks, artillery strikes, sabotage, were largely ineffective. The rhythm of the Red Ball Express persisted, a relentless, unstoppable force shaping the course of the campaign. By mid-September, the full impact was clear. Patton's forces had crossed hundreds of miles of French territory in a matter of weeks, a pace previously unimaginable. German units were in retreat, morale fractured by the relentless advance and the impossibility of halting it. Commanders acknowledged that the U.S. logistical network had become a weapon in itself, delivering fuel, ammunition, and rations with a reliability that no opposition could match. The Red Ball Express had turned the theoretical advantage of mobility into a tangible, battlefield-changing reality. The climax of the Red Ball Express was not a single battle, but a series of interlinked operations, where logistics dictated the pace of engagement, the success of maneuvers, and ultimately, the unraveling of German defenses. The synergy of human endurance, mechanical reliability, and strategic planning had produced a moment in military history where supply and combat became inseparable, and the consequences of logistical mastery were felt across the European theater. With this decisive moment concluded, the focus shifts to aftermath, assessing the consequences for the European campaign, the operational successes and failures, and the long-term lessons of the Red Ball Express for military strategy and the soldiers who endured its demands. September 1944 left the landscape of northern France transformed. Patton's armored columns had swept across the countryside with unprecedented speed, leaving both liberated towns and retreating German forces in their wake. Behind the combat, the Red Ball Express continued its relentless operation, ensuring that fuel, ammunition, and rations reached front lines without interruption. The scale of the operation was staggering. Thousands of trucks, hundreds of miles of convoy routes, and a coordinated workforce that spanned drivers, mechanics, planners, and supply officers. The immediate consequence was tactical. American forces maintained operational tempo that German units could not match. Tanks and artillery were consistently fueled and armed. Infantry units remained supplied, and the advance never stalled for lack of logistics. German counterattacks failed repeatedly, and defensive positions were abandoned under pressure. For the first time in the campaign, the speed of supply dictated the speed of the battlefield itself. The Red Ball Express had become the invisible hand guiding victory. Numbers illustrate the scale. At the peak of operations, the convoy system transported over 12,000 tons of supplies daily. Convoys often ran 24 hours a day, covering hundreds of miles over treacherous terrain. Mechanical failures occurred frequently, yet redundancy and rapid repair kept the flow continuous. Bridges repaired overnight, alternate routes scouted, and drivers rotated tirelessly. Each successful delivery was a testament not only to planning, but to human resilience. Beyond the operational impact, the Red Ball Express reshaped perceptions. German commanders who had once mocked American logistical capacity were forced to confront the reality. Their enemy could sustain rapid advances over long distances, undermining defensive calculations and strategic assumptions. Reports circulated within German command noting that American supply lines remained intact despite attacks, obstacles, and broken infrastructure. The tactical consequences were stark. Patton's units penetrated deeper, faster, and with more flexibility than anticipated. The operation also had profound human consequences. Drivers and support personnel endured fatigue, heat, and the constant stress of maintaining precise schedules. Yet these individuals formed the backbone of the campaign's success. Many soldiers acknowledged that the advance would have faltered without their effort. Letters, journals, and post-war accounts reveal pride in the accomplishment, but also recognition of the grueling demands imposed. Logistics had become a crucible of endurance, revealing the unsung heroism of those far from the front lines, yet indispensable to victory. By the close of this phase of the campaign, it was clear that the Red Ball Express had not only enabled Patton's advance, but had fundamentally altered the operational landscape of the European theater. Supply was no longer a background concern. It was a decisive element in combat, shaping outcomes as surely as artillery or armor. The stage was set to examine the broader implications, strategic lessons, and psychological impact on both Allied and German forces. By late September 1944, the full consequences of the Red Ball Express were undeniable. Patton's forces had raced across northern France at a pace previously thought impossible, outstripping German expectations and leaving disrupted enemy units in their wake. The ability to sustain supply at such a scale had turned operational theory into practice. Speed, maneuver, and momentum were no longer limited by logistical constraints. Fuel, ammunition, and rations flowed like clockwork, enabling armored columns to strike deep and maintain pressure on retreating forces. For German commanders, the shock was profound. Defensive calculations had assumed that the Americans would slow as supply lines stretched, yet that expectation had proven disastrously incorrect. Reports of unbroken convoys, tanks advancing without pause, and infantry units continually supplied forced a re-evaluation of strategy. Retreats and defensive withdrawals were accelerated, morale faltered, and the notion of containing Patton's advance became increasingly unrealistic. In many cases, German units abandoned positions without engaging fully, overwhelmed not by firepower alone, but by the relentless operational tempo sustained by logistics. The human toll on American forces was considerable. Drivers of the Red Ball Express had endured grueling shifts, navigating treacherous roads under blistering sun or pouring rain, often with minimal rest. Mechanics, dispatchers, and planners labored continuously to ensure that convoys remained operational. Casualties from accidents, vehicle breakdowns, and occasional enemy attacks were real, yet the operation's success rested on the extraordinary endurance and discipline of these personnel. Their efforts highlighted a fundamental truth of modern warfare. Victory required not only courage on the battlefield, but also resilience behind the lines. Strategically, the Red Ball Express reshaped Allied planning for the remainder of the European campaign. The operation demonstrated that rapid, reliable logistics could serve as a force multiplier, enabling maneuver warfare on a scale that traditional supply methods could not support. The lessons extended beyond Patton's advance. Military planners recognized the critical importance of integrating supply networks, transportation, and human resources into operational design. Industrial capacity and logistical foresight became as decisive as artillery barges or armored thrusts. The psychological impact was equally significant. For American forces, the steady flow of supplies boosted confidence, reinforcing the belief that their advance was sustainable and unstoppable. For German forces, the relentless tempo, enabled by unseen convoys, instilled frustration, fear, and disbelief. The Red Ball Express had demonstrated that warfare was no longer solely about front lines and firepower. It was about sustaining momentum, projecting force, and leveraging organizational excellence to achieve strategic advantage. By the close of September, the Red Ball Express had secured its place in military history. Thousands of miles of roads had carried the lifeblood of the Third Army. Tens of thousands of personnel had contributed, often unheralded, to a campaign whose speed and effectiveness reshaped the battlefield. Fuel and supplies had kept the Blitz alive, turning logistical innovation into decisive operational success. The campaign illustrated the profound truth that armies are sustained not just by bullets and shells, but by the intricate, tireless work of those who keep them moving. The story of the Red Ball Express is more than a tale of trucks, fuel, and miles of dusty roads. It is a testament to human ingenuity, endurance, and the hidden machinery of war. Across northern France, under a blazing sun and through endless dust, drivers, mechanics, and planners formed the veins of Patton's advance, sustaining a pace that reshaped the European campaign. Their labor, often unnoticed in the shadow of tanks and artillery, became the decisive force behind victory. Strategically, the operation redefined what modern warfare could achieve. The Red Ball Express proved that logistics was not a background task. It was a weapon. The ability to maintain operational tempo, outpace enemy expectations, and strike with relentless speed illustrated that victory could be engineered as much by planning and endurance as by firepower. For German commanders, the realization was sobering. The war was no longer solely decided on the battlefield, but in the unseen networks that kept armies moving. On a human level, the Red Ball Express exemplified courage of a different kind. Drivers endured exhaustion, heat, and constant risk, yet pressed forward without pause. Mechanics, planners, and support personnel labored tirelessly behind the scenes, their efforts ensuring that each tank moved, each gun fired, and each soldier was fed. This quiet heroism underscores a truth often overlooked, that in war, the greatest feats are not only those of combat, but also of endurance, coordination, and unwavering commitment to a purpose greater than oneself. The legacy of the Red Ball Express extends beyond 1944. It influenced military thinking on logistics, mobility, and the integration of human and technological resources. It demonstrated that the capacity to supply, sustain, and adapt could shape